Chapter 1. Arrival. The key stuck before it turned. She jiggled it once, twice, then gave the door a frustrated shove. With a groan that sounded far too alive, the heavy wood gave way, and the old caretaker's house finally opened to her. "Home sweet haunted home," Lydia muttered under her breath. Her voice echoed back in the narrow entryway, bouncing off walls lined with fading wallpaper and water stains. The air smelled like mothballs, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like the copper tang of blood. She shook that thought away. Just rust, she told herself. Old pipes, old house. The realtor had called it charming, but Lydia saw more, decrepit. She dropped her duffel on the floorboards, which creaked a complaint loud enough to rattle in her bones. Still, she felt a strange surge of relief. The house was hers, or at least, hers for $400 a month and however long she could stand it. She stepped out onto the porch again to breathe. The view stretched down the hill into the small town of Glenville, its cluster of shops and church steeple nestled in amber October trees. But turning the other way, there it was, the cemetery. The wrought-iron fence curled black against the gray sky, enclosing rows of crooked tombstones that leaned toward the house as if eager to listen. A marble angel missing its head kept vigil by the gate. Wind blew through dry grass, carrying a faint clatter, as though bones shifted under the soil. Lydia swallowed. She told herself she didn't mind. After all, the whole point was to find something cheap, quiet, and out of the way. She wasn't about to nitpick the neighbors, even if they happened to be dead. Dragging her suitcase inside, she closed the door. It shut with a sigh, like it was tired of keeping secrets. Unpacking was quick. Half her life fit into 3 boxes and a bag. Divorce did that. The settlement hadn't left her with much besides a battered Honda and whatever kitchenware her ex-husband hadn't wanted. Not that she'd fought him for anything. Fighting meant clinging, and clinging wasn't survival. No family, no safety net. Foster care hadn't exactly handed her relatives who might take her in. Friends? They'd all quietly disappeared during the divorce mess, or maybe she'd disappeared on them. Didn't matter. She was used to standing alone. But here, in the caretaker's house, she might finally be able to rebuild. The living room had a sagging couch, probably left by the last tenant. A fireplace, choked with ash. Windows looking directly onto the gravestones. She tried not to dwell on that part. By the time she stacked her few dishes in the cupboard and made up the bed, dusk was already sinking its teeth into the sky. The house seemed to shrink with the dark, settling around her with little pops and sighs, as though testing her tolerance. She curled up on the couch with a blanket, listening. Somewhere upstairs, a floorboard creaked. She froze, her throat tight. Probably just the house, she thought. Temperature shifting, wood expanding. Old houses did that. She repeated the logic 3 times in her head, a mantra, until her muscles loosened. Still, she kept glancing at the ceiling until her eyes burned. That night she dreamed of keys. Dozens of them, all tangled in a ring, all rusted, all turning locks she couldn't see. In the dream, she stood at the cemetery gate, trying key after key, while shadows gathered behind the tombstones, watching. She woke with her heart hammering. The house was silent, but the silence wasn't empty. It was expectant. She padded to the window and peered out at the cemetery. The graves were pale outlines under the moon, their stones catching silver light like teeth. The headless angel loomed against the iron fence. Something moved among the rows. Her breath caught. She pressed her forehead to the cold glass, trying to focus. It could have been a deer. A trick of shadows. A breeze shifting weeds. But as she watched, one of the leaning stones shuddered as though nudged from behind. Slowly, it tilted forward, dropping with a muffled thump into the earth. Lydia stepped back from the window, her pulse stuttering. She thought of waking the realtor, complaining, demanding a refund. But the truth rose up sharply. She had nowhere else to go. No money, no one. This was it. So she squared her shoulders, muttered, "Just the wind," and crawled back into bed. But even with her eyes shut, she couldn't shake the image of that headless angel watching. Waiting. Chapter 2. The house introduces itself. By the second morning, Lydia had convinced herself the gravestone toppling had been some natural erosion. Old stone. Weak foundation. Not ghosts. Definitely not ghosts. She repeated the logic while she made instant coffee in the caretaker's chipped mug, the kind that still smelled faintly of cigarette smoke even after she'd washed it. Outside, the October sun was thin, pale gold over rows of crooked marble teeth. The cemetery looked less menacing in daylight, though the headless angel still loomed like it had been placed there specifically to unsettle her. She avoided looking at it too long. Instead, she focused on making the house hers. Cleaning, unpacking, rearranging the sagging couch so it didn't directly face the windows that stared into the graves. She found an old broom in the closet and swept up years of dust and dirt. The bristles scraped across the floor in a steady rhythm. For the first time in months, she felt steady, purposeful, until the broom slid from her hands. It clattered to the floorboards and rolled uphill. She blinked, crouched, stared at it. The house was on a slope, sure, but gravity didn't bend backwards. Still, maybe the boards were warped. She nudged the broom again, experimentally. It rolled in the same impossible direction, stopping against the closed basement door. Yeah, no thanks, she muttered, scooping it up and jamming it into the closet. The basement could stay shut forever as far as she was concerned. By evening, the house was cleaner, if not exactly welcoming. Lydia rewarded herself with frozen pizza, sitting on the couch. She left the TV on for noise, though the only stations she picked up were static and a local weather channel. Wind rattled the windows. The trees hissed like gossip. Halfway through her pizza, something shifted upstairs. A heavy thud, like a box dropping. Her eyes snapped upward. She waited, pulse in her ears. Silence. Lydia forced a laugh. Critters. Squirrels. Raccoons. She took another bite of pizza, chewing slow, her ears tuned to every creak. Then came the unmistakable sound of footsteps. 1 step, 2, 3, crossing her bedroom floor. The slice of pizza drooped from her hand. Her skin prickled. She stood, grabbed the broom again like a spear, and started up the staircase. Each step groaned under her weight. Halfway up, she almost turned back. But pride shoved her forward. The bedroom was empty. Bed unrumpled, boxes stacked neatly against the wall. No raccoon, no squirrel, no burglar. Just the cold hush of an old house at night. Lydia exhaled hard, lowering the broom. You're losing it. Then she noticed the photo frame on the dresser. It had been facing the wall when she left it. Now it faced the bed, her high school graduation photo staring back at her. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't touched it. She knew she hadn't touched it. The house creaked, as if amused. That night, Lydia locked the bedroom door and shoved a chair under the knob for good measure. It didn't help. She woke at 3 a.m. to whispering. At first, she thought it was wind moaning through the chimney. But the more she listened, the clearer it became. Syllables curling into her name. Lydia, Lydia, Lydia. Her chest locked tight. She yanked the blanket over her head like a terrified child, heart pounding until the whispers faded. Eventually, exhaustion dragged her under again. When she woke at dawn, the chair had been moved. It stood neatly back at her desk, as though someone had politely returned it. Chapter 3. The First Sight. By the third night, Lydia had stopped telling herself it was just an old house. The photo frame, the chair, the whispering, none of it fit into logic, no matter how many excuses she whispered to herself in the dark. But she wasn't leaving, not yet. Rent this cheap was rarer than kindness from her ex-husband. Besides, she was sick of running. She'd run from foster homes, run from failed relationships, run from every place that ever turned sour. If she ran now, she wasn't sure she'd stop. So she stayed. She cooked pasta, drank wine out of a chipped mug, and turned the weather channel on again, pretending she belonged here. The TV's static glow blurred across the living room walls. That was when she heard it. 3 knocks. Not at the front door. Not the back. From inside the wall, the sound reverberated through the plaster just behind her head. Sharp, deliberate. Lydia dropped her mug, wine bleeding into the rug. Hello? She croaked. Her own voice sounded ridiculous, but the silence that followed was worse. She grabbed her phone, flicked on the flashlight, and swept it across the room. Nothing. Just dust bunnies dancing like fireflies. Then the basement door rattled. The knob twisted once, twice, then stilled. Her throat went dry. Nope, she whispered, backing away. The TV snapped off. Darkness swallowed the room. She bolted upstairs, slamming her bedroom door and fumbled with the lock. Her hands shook too hard to wedge the chair again, so she collapsed on the bed instead, heart battering her ribs. Minutes dragged. Every creak sounded like footsteps. Every sigh of wind sounded like breath. Then came the cold. A sudden drop in temperature, so sharp her breath puffed in the dark. Her blanket did nothing. The air pressed heavy, wet, like the moment before a storm. Lydia sat up and froze. Something stood in the corner. At first, she thought it was a shadow, cast strangely by moonlight. But it moved when she moved her head, separating from the darkness. Tall, thin, its edges flickered like smoke, but the face, God, the face was pale and hollow-eyed, as if carved from ash. It didn't move, it only watched her. Her scream stuck in her throat. She curled back against the headboard, eyes wide, heart in her ears. What do you want? The thing tilted its head, slow and deliberate. For a moment, it almost looked curious. Then it stepped forward. The air punched out of her lungs. She fumbled blindly for her phone, for light, for anything. Her hand found the lamp cord and yanked. The bulb flared to life. And the figure was gone. She sat shaking until dawn, every muscle stiff, eyes refusing to close. When the sun finally bled through the curtains, the room looked perfectly normal. Bed, boxes, lamp, nothing else, nothing except the closet door. It was open. She hadn't opened it. Inside, her clothes hung limp and still. But on the floor, scrawled into the dust in uneven strokes, was a single word. Stay. Chapter 4. The Touch. By the fourth night, Lydia barely recognized herself. Her usual grit, the one that had carried her through foster care, through divorce, through too many slammed doors, was thinning. She was jumpy, exhausted, snapping at shadows. Every time she passed the closet, she swore the word stay glared at her like a threat. She should have left. She knew that. Normal people would have left. But where would she go? She locked herself in with cheap wine again, flipping through the same 3 static channels. White fuzz whispered across the screen, like voices just out of range. She muted it. The silence wasn't better. The basement door rattled again. Lydia stiffened. She could almost hear a rhythm in the knocks, like someone was tapping out a message in code. Her stomach twisted. She grabbed her phone, pulled up a flashlight app, and forced herself down the hallway. Every step felt like it took a year. The knob twitched as she reached it, as if anticipating her touch. Her hand shook as she reached out. The cold brass felt slick under her palm. She gritted her teeth, turned it. The door flew open. Her light cut through dust and stairs descending into black. The air that rushed up was damp, like wet earth and rot. She gagged, covering her nose. The flashlight trembled, illuminating stone walls lined with shelves. Shapes sat along them. Jars? Tools? Too hard to see. Something shifted at the bottom of the steps. Her beam caught the faint outline of feet. Bare, pale feet. Hello? The word cracked in her throat. The feet moved fast. Up the stairs. Straight at her. Lydia screamed and slammed the door, shoving her whole weight against it. Something hit from the other side, once, twice, hard enough to rattle the frame. Then silence. She stumbled back, gasping, hands over her mouth. The house seemed to settle again, smug in its stillness. She didn't go to bed that night. She curled on the couch, every light blazing. At some point near dawn, her eyes sagged shut. That was when it touched her. Cold fingers brushed her cheek. Her eyes flew open. A shadow loomed above her, crouched over the couch. Its face was wrong, stretched thin like wet paper, mouth too wide. The fingers slid down her jaw, then clamped around her wrist. She yanked back, but the grip was like ice iron. Let me go. The figure leaned closer, breath colder than the grave itself. Then, in a whisper so soft it barely stirred the air, stay. The lights flickered and it vanished. Her wrist burned with the imprint of fingers that weren't there. Lydia sat frozen until morning. When sunlight finally spilled through the window, she stumbled into the bathroom, shaking. The mirror showed 5 distinct bruises circling her wrist. Chapter 5. The Others. Lydia didn't leave the house the next day. She thought about it, pacing in circles, staring at her car keys and her packed bag. But every time she imagined stepping outside, her mind painted images of the cemetery closing in. Stones leaning farther, shadows waiting by the fence. That word again. Stay. It wasn't a command anymore. It was a sentence. She spent the afternoon cleaning just to keep busy. Dusting, wiping windows, scrubbing the bathroom until her hands ached. By sunset, the house shined, but the air hadn't lightened. If anything, it pressed heavier. The whispers started at dusk. At first, she thought it was the TV again, but she hadn't turned it on. The voices came from the walls, layered over each other like overlapping radio signals. Men, women, children. All muttering too fast to catch, like they were bickering over her. She pressed her palms to her ears. Stop. The whispers rose, sharper. Louder. Stop. Silence. Then, from the kitchen, 3 sharp knocks. She grabbed the broom, heart pounding. The kitchen was dark, though she swore she'd left the light on. She flicked the switch. Nothing. The bulb had burned out. Her phone's flashlight beam caught the outline of her kitchen table. 4 chairs were pulled neatly into place. A 5th chair had been added. She didn't own a 5th chair. The broom shook in her hand. She took a cautious step closer. That's when she saw them. Figures seated at the table. Faint, translucent outlines, flickering in and out of sight. A man with hollow eyes. A woman with stringy hair hanging over her face. A child whose mouth stretched wider and wider until it disappeared into the blur of its cheek. All of them turned to look at her at once. Lydia stumbled backward, her phone clattering to the floor. Its beam spun across the walls, catching flashes. Faces, hands, eyes. All crowding the room, pressing close. The air grew suffocatingly cold. Breath curled from her lips. And then they spoke in unison. Stay. The force of it rattled the dishes in the cupboard, shook the pictures on the wall. She bolted, shoving through the living room, but every window she passed filled with faces staring in from the cemetery. Dozens of them. Hundreds. Pale, waiting, hungry. She ran upstairs, slammed the bedroom door, locked it. But the lock clicked open on its own. Slowly, deliberately, the door creaked wide, revealing the hallway full of shadows, all shifting and moving, filling the space with cold breath and low murmurs. Her vision swam. Her body screamed to flee, but there was nowhere to run. They had her. She woke at dawn sprawled across the floor, the door wide open. Every light in the house blazed. Her phone lay in the hallway, its screen cracked. She picked it up with shaking hands. The camera app was open. One photo was saved, her, asleep on the couch. And behind her, dozens of figures standing in the dark. Chapter 6. The Siege. The house no longer slept. Every hour, every corner, every breath. It was alive with them. Lydia had given up trying to keep lights on, because bulbs shattered the moment she reached for a switch. The rooms glowed only in flickers. Lamps sputtering, shadows dancing like firelight. She tried boarding the cellar door shut. Nails bent, wood splintered. By morning, the door stood open again, yawning black. And always, that word whispered in the walls, carved into the dust, breathed against her neck when she wasn't looking. Stay. On the 6th night, the kitchen clock stopped at 3 a.m. Lydia knew it because every other clock in the house froze too. Phone, microwave, even the Weather Channel ticker. All of it stuck, like time itself was caught in their grip. She stood in the hallway, clutching the broom like a weapon. Her wrist still bore faint purple bruises. Then came the footsteps. Not just one pair this time. Dozens. The ceiling groaned under them, the staircase quivered. Heavy boots, light scuffs, the patter of children's feet. All of them moving at once. Her breath hitched. Get out, she whispered, voice cracking. This is my house now. The walls rattled with laughter. The bedroom mirror splintered. Hairline cracks spider webbed across the glass, bending her reflection into grotesque fragments. Her own face stared back at her in 6 broken shards. Wide-eyed, terrified. Then the shards moved without her. Her reflection smiled. Every single one. She staggered back, tripping over her own feet. Her shoulder slammed the doorframe. When she looked up again, the mirror was whole. Her reflection stared back, pale and hollow-eyed. Behind her reflection, something loomed. A man. No, several. Faces layered like masks, sliding over each other. Mouths stretching wide, eyes sinking deep, until one mouth pushed to the front and whispered through the glass, "Stay." The glass bulged outward, like something pressing from the other side. Lydia screamed and hurled the broom at it. The mirror shattered, glass spraying across the room. Her reflection's smile lingered a moment longer before fading. She barely had time to catch her breath when the cold hit again. This time it wasn't a draft. It was everywhere at once, slamming into her like a wave. Her teeth chattered violently. Frost spread across the window panes in branching veins. And then she felt them. Hands. Not one, not two. Dozens. Clutching her arms, her hair, her ankles. Invisible but heavy, dragging her to the floor. She thrashed, clawed, kicked, but the weight held her pinned. Faces materialized above her, swirling in a blur, mouths open, eyes burning with pale fire. Their whispers rose to a roar. Stay, 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 stay. Lydia screamed until her throat tore raw. Then, as quickly as they'd grabbed her, the hands released. She scrambled into a corner, sobbing, rocking against the wall. The house stilled, and from the far corner of the room, a child's voice spoke. Clear, small, don't fight, they won't let you leave. Lydia froze, raising her head. A little girl stood there. Or what was left of one. Her outline pale, her dress torn and faded, her eyes too wide and too black. The girl tilted her head. They've been waiting for you. Chapter 7. The Trap. By the 7th night, Lydia realized something awful. The house wasn't just haunted. It was closing around her. She tried leaving that morning, determined to grab her keys and drive until she saw a chain hotel or a gas station diner. Anywhere but here. But when she opened the front door, the porch didn't lead to the graveyard path or her driveway. It led to another hallway. Her own hallway. She slammed the door, heart lurching. Tried the back door, same thing. The bathroom window, same thing. Every exit spilled her back inside. Like the house had folded in on itself, swallowing the world outside. The cemetery loomed in every window, but it wasn't the same anymore. The iron fence pressed closer, headstones crowded the porch steps, and the headless angel now stood directly in the yard, its faceless gaze angled up at her window. She staggered back, bile rising in her throat. She wasn't trapped in a house. She was trapped in a coffin. That night, the whispers didn't wait until midnight. They started at dusk, filling every room, a constant susurrus of voices, too many to count. The air vibrated with them. Lydia stuffed her ears with tissue, but the whispers came from inside her skull. Stay, 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 she shouted until her throat burned, hurled plates at the walls, smashed glasses. Nothing drowned them out, and then, as though responding, the house shifted. Literally shifted. The floorboards groaned and tilted. The hallway stretched long and narrow, doorways multiplying like mirrors reflecting mirrors. Lydia bolted, heart slamming, running for the stairs. But the staircase twisted upward in impossible angles, doubling back on itself, steps folding like origami. She ran anyway, lungs on fire, until she burst into the bedroom. The little girl ghost stood waiting. Her dark eyes gleamed like ink. They're almost ready, she whispered. Lydia backed into the corner, shaking. Who's ready? The girl tilted her head. The ones beneath. The ones who built this place. Lydia's mouth went dry. What do you want from me? The girl's pale lips curved into a smile too wide for her face. We want you to stay. The room plunged black. Lydia's phone flashlight flared weakly, just enough to show her the walls. Hands pushed through them. Dozens. Pale and gray, stretching from the plaster like clay, clawing toward her. Fingers grazed her arms, her face, her hair. One icy hand wrapped around her ankle and yanked hard enough to drag her to the floor. She screamed, kicking, clawing, nails splitting on the wood. The little girl giggled. The hands pulled harder. Her body slid across the room, toward the open closet door. Toward the black beyond it. No, Lydia shrieked, scrambling, gripping the doorframe with bloodied nails. You can't have me. The closet pulsed with a breath of air. Sea cold, damp, smelling of graves. The hands yanked harder. Then, silence. They let go. The closet door slammed shut so violently the mirror cracked. And the whispers hushed all at once. Lydia collapsed, gasping, sobbing into her scraped palms. The house was still, too still. Then the girl's voice came from directly beside her ear, soft as silk. Tomorrow, it begins. Chapter 8. Hell Week. The days stopped making sense. Lydia wasn't sure what day it was anymore. She marked time by bruises, by broken things, by how long she could keep her eyes open before exhaustion dragged her down. The whispers never stopped now. Morning, noon, night. They curled through the walls, slipped into her ears, filled her chest until she couldn't even hear her own thoughts. When she screamed at them, they screamed back. On the first night of Hell Week, she woke choking. Hands, not real, not flesh, but cold and pressing, wrapped around her throat. She thrashed, tearing at nothing, gasping until spots danced before her eyes. When they vanished, she lay shaking in the dark, too afraid to close her eyes again. On the second night, every picture she owned had been turned to face the wall. Every single one. The divorce papers, the graduation photo, even her old driver's license, tucked into her wallet. The faces all hidden, as if she had no right to exist here. On the third night, she tried barricading herself in the bathroom. It didn't matter. The tub filled on its own, dark water rising, spilling onto the floor. When she looked into the water, her reflection didn't match. It smiled while she screamed. The cemetery pressed closer each day. From her windows, she could see the graves heaving upward, soil cracking, stones splitting as if restless things pushed from beneath. The headless angel now stood directly outside the front door, its broken wings stretching wider. Sometimes, she swore it moved when she blinked. On the fourth night, the little girl ghost returned. Lydia had tried to keep every light blazing, but it didn't matter. Bulbs popped like breaking bones as soon as the sun went down. The girl stepped into the candlelight, pale and flickering. You're almost ready, she whispered. For what? Lydia begged. Tell me what you want. The girl only smiled, a black pit where her mouth should have been. Then she blew out the candle. The fifth night, Lydia woke to find she wasn't alone in bed. A man-shaped hollow pressed into the mattress beside her. The sheets dipped, the weight undeniable. She bolted upright, but the hollow shifted with her, curling closer, until cold arms slid around her waist. She shrieked, tumbling to the floor. The bed was empty, the sheets still indented. By the sixth night, she was delirious. Food went untouched. Her body shook with exhaustion, but her mind refused rest. The whispers had become voices she almost recognized, foster parents, her ex-husband, teachers, people long gone. All of them repeating the same word until it lost meaning. Stay, stay, stay. She clawed at her ears until blood stained her nails. The seventh night came. Halloween Eve. Lydia sat curled against the wall, shivering, her body weak and broken. The house was breathing. Floorboards rising and falling like lungs, walls swelling, then shrinking. The cellar door gaped wide, black as an open mouth. From the yard, voices rose. Not whispers this time. Songs. Voices chanting in a language she didn't know, carrying through the windows like a funeral hymn. She crawled to the glass. The cemetery was alive. Figures moved among the stones. Shadows by the dozens, by the hundreds. They stood in rows, candlelight glowing in their hollow eyes, all of them turned toward the caretaker's house. All of them waiting. Her breath fogged the glass. Her heart stuttered. Tomorrow was Halloween, and she wasn't sure she'd survive it. Chapter 9. Halloween. Midnight struck like a gunshot. The caretaker's house exhaled. Every candle snuffed out in unison. Every bulb burst, showering glass. Every window slammed shut as though nailed from the outside. Lydia was swallowed by darkness. And then the voices began. Not whispers this time, not murmurs. A chorus. Thousands of voices rising from the graveyard, chanting in a language her ears weren't built to hear. The house shook with the sound, rattling like a cage struck with a hammer. She clutched the doorknob, but when she yanked it open, she wasn't staring at the porch anymore. She was staring at rows and rows of graves. The yard had flooded inside. Coffins rose half buried in her floorboards. Tombstones pierced through her wallpaper. A mausoleum door gaped where the staircase used to be. The cemetery had swallowed the house whole. The little girl appeared in the doorway, her eyes glistening black. They're here. Who's here? Lydia screamed, her voice cracking. The girl lifted her hand. The walls bulged, split. Figures poured through. Not quite solid, not quite shadow. Bodies dragging themselves from plaster and stone, jawless mouths open in screams, eyeless faces fixed on Lydia. They clawed their way into the living room, dozens of them, leaving streaks of frost in their wake. They want you, the girl said simply. Why me? Lydia sobbed, backing away. The girl's face tilted. Because you stayed. The dead surged. Hands erupted from the floor, grabbing Lydia's ankles, her wrists, pulling her down. She thrashed, ripping free, stumbling toward the kitchen. Plates shattered as something invisible hurled them across the room. Knives skittered from drawers, embedding in the cabinets inches from her head. She bolted down the hall. But the hallway stretched. Longer, longer, each step pulling her further into an endless tunnel. Doors slammed shut behind her one by one, trapping her deeper inside. She turned a corner and ran straight into the angel. The broken statue now stood inside the house, wings stretching wide, now with a head, stone face blank and eyeless. Its hand rose, jagged fingers reaching. She screamed, diving past it, scraping her arms raw on the wall. The mausoleum door yawned where the stairs had been. And something was coming out. Shapes too tall, too wide, crawling on limbs that bent the wrong way. Their faces flickered like broken film reels. Children, women, men. Sliding from one to another in jerks of motion. Their voices overlapped in shrieks and chants. The house itself trembled, wood splintering. The little girl giggled, standing at the edge of the chaos. They'll take you now, she whispered. Lydia stumbled backward, chest heaving, tears streaming down her dirt-streaked face. No, I won't let them. She grabbed the nearest thing, a broken chair leg, and swung wildly. It cracked through one shadowy figure, which burst apart like smoke. Another lunged. She shoved it back, adrenaline surging through her veins. She wasn't going quietly. The ghosts howled, closing in. The hands dragged. The angel loomed. The walls bled shadows. And above it all, the chanting rose into a roar. The last thing Lydia saw before the world went black was the little girl's face splitting into a grin too wide, too sharp, rows of teeth like nails. And then silence. Lydia woke on the floor. Morning sunlight spilled through the windows. The cemetery was quiet. The angel was back in its place outside. The house was just a house. No whispers. No voices. Her body ached like she'd been beaten, bruises mottling her skin, scratches stinging. But for the first time in her life, Lydia smiled. She had survived, and as terrifying as it had been, she realized something deep in her bones. It was the most alive she'd ever felt. Her laugh cracked, half sob, half relief. And as she glanced out at the cemetery, she whispered to herself, I can't wait for next Halloween. Chapter 10. November 1st. The morning air was crisp, the kind that bit her skin but carried the smell of leaves and damp earth. Lydia sat on the porch steps, bruised and bandaged, a mug of coffee warming her hands. Her eyes swept over the cemetery. Rows of crooked stones, sunlight glinting off wet grass, a crow perched on the headless angel's shoulder like nothing had ever happened. As if the night before hadn't torn the world open. She breathed deep. Her chest still ached, but each inhale felt steadier. No shadows slinking at the edge of her vision. No whispers curling into her ears. Just silence. Just stillness. Normal people, she thought, would be gone by now. They'd have run screaming in the middle of the night, thrown their keys back at the landlord, maybe burned the house to the ground on their way out. But Lydia wasn't normal. She took another sip of coffee, and a smile tugged at her lips. All her life she had been drifting. Between foster homes, between jobs, between relationships. Always a guest, never a resident. Never really belonging. Until last night, terrifying as it was, the house had seen her. Tested her. Even the dead themselves had reached for her, claimed her as one of their own. And instead of running, she had stood her ground. For the first time in her life, Lydia felt chosen. She laughed softly into the steam rising from her cup. I'm staying, she whispered, glancing toward the graves. You hear me? This is home now. A breeze stirred through the cemetery, rustling the leaves. The angel seemed to tilt its wings toward her, just slightly. Lydia's smile widened. Next October would come. She didn't doubt the spirits would rise again. The house would rattle, the walls would bleed shadows, the dead would claw for her. And she couldn't wait. She raised her mug like a toast. To next Halloween, she said. The breeze answered, carrying her laughter over the stones. If you enjoyed this spooky tale, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring the bell so you won't miss the next chilling story. The spirits approve.